to start getting excited about this. And so, for example, last September, we had around 100 people, former employees, both engineering, but also the girls that assembled the computers over here to come and visit. So it's been amazing, an amazing journey. I was lucky enough to get something like 3,000 PDF files that we digitized, we scanned from Álvaro Oliveira. So all the paperwork, lots and lots of the documents, some of them with your name also involved. So all things that I've been sharing, discussing with David what to do, because we've been trying to help each other to document this in the best possible way.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Whenever you get that done, I'd be interested in seeing the things that you put together on it.
Probably we can show you one or two today at least. we have prepared, but it's lots and lots of things.
Yeah, I'm in the process. My kids have been interested in me writing my bio, and I'm in the process of doing that. And some of this material certainly would be of interest, I think.
Okay. Happy to help. Whatever we can do. That it's on my side. I'm available to try to help, of course.
Super.
Well, that's really crazy, isn't it? The things you wanted to know, Danny was already on it.
Yep. Some of them, yes.
I've been in Portugal in the last 2 times in the last few years. A friend of mine celebrated his 70th birthday, and we were down on the coast.
Okay. Where in Portugal? Do you remember any name?
I'm trying to give me the down on the south coast.
Okay, close to Algarve, probably, or Alentejo.
That's the word I was trying to think of. Yes.
Okay. That was the third thing I wanted to tell you, which is if you happen to come, I would be delighted, obviously, to get to know you in person, and I'm sure we'll have a couple of things to talk about for sure, and probably put you in contact with some of the guys you may still remember or not from the old days.
Great,
that's so funny. And Danny, this is the kind of thing that. I started doing what I started doing a bunch of years back, and I thought, I'll be wildly successful if 3 people find my website useful.
And so far, no one has yet, right? Am I right?
That's exactly right, Adam. Danny, this is Adam. Adam Triunfo.
How's it going, Danny?
Helps me out with these. He's our co-host.
A couple of your past meetings, and so I've seen Adam very active in the participation. So
and what we like about Adam is that he's enthusiastic. He comes from a different angle with. He's a big Bally arcade person and a bunch of other things. And he knows a little bit about the Timex stuff, but what he's really great at is asking the questions that I assume that everybody already knows the answer to.
Yeah. So, I know this much about the Timex, just enough to get me in trouble. So
right.
Where are you located, Adam?
What was that?
Where are you located?
I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Good for you.
Yeah. And so does Ryan. He's also with us today. He was over here yesterday and we were messing around with the Timex 2068. So we had our own little 2-person meeting.
Yeah, so I mentioned Carl earlier, the person who has painted some of his accessories silver. Mm-hmm. And Carl's also in Albuquerque. The critical mass of Timex users is in Albuquerque. The last physical group.
Yeah.
Timex USA, guys.
That's right. Don't forget.
Yeah. You have lots over here from across the pond, and if you talk to Polish guys, they're crazy about Timex creations.
Yes, that's something we should do. We should try to get some folks on from Poland and find out about that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, it's pushing 2:00. It's close to 2:00. Close enough to 2:00 for me.
The stream is working.
Good.
I
awesome.
just checked. So I'm just putting the description now on the video and things like that.
Oh, thank you, Joa.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, I gotta remember how to spot. There we go, spotlight. So, Danny, I'm gonna do a very, very small introduction because I don't, you know you best. And then I'm gonna spotlight you, and everybody else. We'll just keep quiet while you talk, and then we'll have 4,000 questions for you.
About maybe one or two of them.
Right. One thing, if you didn't have it on your agenda, do talk about the person, with the advertising agency that eventually
One of the
because that's to me, that's Joel and I were talking about this the other day, and I was relating it to him, and it struck me as like really important in the marketing portion of the story.
I will. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to hit the record button. I'm going to dispense with my usual introduction. I'll just bump that in later. Hi, I'm David Anderson, and today we are joined by Danny Ross. Danny was the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Timex Computer Corporation from, I hope I get this right, from March 1982 until January 1984. Danny was brought in to start the computer division of Timex Computer Corporation. And he was responsible for the worldwide operations of the corporation. Under his direction, Timex captured 28% of the home computer market. They developed 3 computer systems and delivered more than 200 software titles. If you paid any attention to Timex computers in the early 80s, Danny was the public face. You would see his face in Popular Electronics, in InfoWorld, in any kind of print article about the Timex computer. Danny was usually the person being quoted, demonstrating the computer, introducing new products. And so with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Danny, and he can tell us all about himself and his world.
Good. Appreciate that, David. First, I want to say how excited I am. A couple of months ago, I heard about the discussions that this group has twice a month, and it was very exciting to me that there's so much interest in something that occurred 40 years ago that sold for $100 at retail, $99, I should say, at retail, and had so much interest in today's time. Today, what I'd like to do is to kind of give you a little bit of background on how I got to Timex, tell you a little bit about my experience with Timex, and tell you some stories that I think that most of you are not aware of that would be of interest to you that you probably haven't heard before. Stories that were important to Timex at the time. First of all, just on my personal background, I grew up in Louisiana, in a very small town in Louisiana, about 5,000 people. The town is noted for lots of pine trees, lumber mills, and pulpwood. And I guess I'm still on, but I'm seeing a picture now of a Timex computer that's in a suitcase. But at any rate, David is.
Hang on, I'm working on it.
But back in the early days, I attended Louisiana Tech. I got a degree in math and computer science. The computer science in 1960s was a little different than it is today. I might say we at my college, Louisiana Tech, We had a 1620 computer that had 16K of memory on it. It was powered by punch cards, and we programmed in Fortran. And that was the extent of computer science at that stage of the game. And from there, I went to IBM, and I spent 2 years at IBM learning more about computers than I had learned in college, and worked with IBM for a number of years, and was attracted away from IBM by the former branch manager of the San Francisco office. He started a new company called ITEL Corporation, and at that time you could not. They just started selling. You could buy a computer. They hadn't started leasing computers at that time, and we were in the leasing business. And so I learned a lot about finance there. From there, I started a finance company for Memorex Corporation, and it was from that position that I ended up being contacted by a headhunter, and his name is Stuart Bader. And Stuart asked me if I would be interested in a personal computer company called Timex, that they were trying to get into business and they were looking for somebody to run the business. And it sounded very interesting to me. Apple was getting a little interest at that time and a lot of discussion about it. This was back in 81, 82. And he submitted my resume to Timex, and I ended up getting the job there at Timex. Before joining them, while I was in college, one of the things that attracted IBM to me is that I started a business. My first business I started was during my final year at Louisiana Tech, and I was a door-to-door wig salesman. A friend of mine, and this was the 1960s, Diana Ross and the Supremes were very popular at that time, and they were wearing a lot of bouffant hairdos and wigs, and it became and I sold wigs door to door to a little community down the street, Grambling, which is an all-black college, which is located about 4 miles down the street. And they called me Mr. Dan, the Wig Man. And I learned a lot about business during that time. Learned a lot about dealing with people, learning a lot about solving problems, and made some money. I could buy wigs for $15 and sell them for $100, and they were selling it retail for $250 at that time. So that was a pretty good deal. The only problem was that my customers didn't have $100. So I had to figure out some way to get the product financed, and I went to two finance companies, one called Friendly Bob Adams and the other one called Understanding Henry. And I ended up doing business with Understanding Henry. And I would go to him with a loan agreement for $100, and he would give me $85 if they passed credit on the spot. And so I bought it for $15, sold it for $85, and I thought that was a pretty good margin at that time. At any rate, from IBM, Memorex, then to Timex. Timex was just an exciting place at that time. It really was. And first thing I did, of course, was meet with Clive Sinclair. Clive was the most unusual guy I think that I've met in my lifetime. I spent a lot of time with him over the 2+ years that I was with Timex, and Clive was a bright guy. As you know, he was the head of Mensa. He was the spoke and had an office at Cambridge University, and he was just an unusual guy. He had two personalities. When you turn the camera on Clive, his personality totally changed. He turned into a guy that liked to have the bright lights on, and he could really smooth the crowd, and it was incredible. Clive was he was a genius for sure. And he, obviously, you folks know, he liked to build something that was inexpensive and was useful. And he did that number of times. Some of the products, of course, he was very instrumental in getting to us. The first product, of course, he introduced was the ZX81, and that was the identical model of that we introduced the introduction came at the Central Park in New York. We had an announcement that Timex was getting into the computer business, and we went there and introduced the world's first computer to sell for less than $100. I'll show you a copy of one of those computers in a second. But at that presentation, there was just a lot of interest that was produced, I think, in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, papers all over the country, I think, carried the story of that. Lots of newspapers. At that time, I had a little bit more hair than I have now. David mentioned that the face of Timex had my picture in, but this is one of the pictures here that appeared in one of the computer magazines. And you can see I had a little bit more hair than I have today in that picture. But that being said, it was an exciting time. A guy named Ben Rosen. Ben Rosen was with an investment banking firm. He followed the industry, and Ben Rosen really caught on to Timex, and of course he knew Timex, the watch company, but the announcement he felt was very important, and Ben started inviting me to attend some of his analyst meetings. And at these analyst meetings, they had two other early people in the personal computer business. Of course, we were in segments that was themed at the time to be the home computer marketplace. And the people participating in that marketplace were Commodore, Texas Instrument, later Atari, and then Coleco got into it towards the end of the game. But people that were in the Ben Rosen conference were, in fact, I sat in on several of these meetings on panels with Steve and Bill Gates. Very interesting, very smart people. Steve was a very inventive person, as we all know. He had a personality that he would take a shot at you if he got a shot at it. And one of the presentations that I was making, I talked about Timex being a brand name that was noted around the world, as people were looking at that brand name multiple times a day when they looked at their watch, and it reflected on the brand name. And that being the case, when we introduced the computer, we had things that other people didn't have. We had a distribution channel and a brand name that nobody else had, and that was very important to our introduction. Most companies fail because they don't get distribution. Most companies do end up getting product technology, but the distribution is a tough thing to do, and that became something that we were able to do better than and easier than most. Not maybe better, but I talked about Timex and watching. There was a lot of investment bankers. These were rich dudes in the audience, and I talked about the fact that our name would be recognized more than anybody else's because. And when Steve Jobs got up and started talking, he knew the audience. He knew that they were high rollers, and he got up and he said, "Timex," and he looked at his watch. Timex. How many of you have a Timex watch on? course, these were the investment bankers, and they had Rolexes on. Nobody raised their hand. He said, "Case closed." So that was a story of my Steve. And I kept up with Steve over the years, and as well as Bill Gates. And it was quite an experience. And I was humbled to be in their company. When we introduced the first computer sale, it was at Macy's department store in New York City. This is one of the world's biggest stores, and it was really, really interesting how people were lined up outside of the store to get a Timex computer, and we sold thousands of them. The first day that we opened the door up, and it was a very exciting day for Timex. And we did that intentionally because we knew it would get a lot of press coverage and start to get the Timex in the computer business out before the public. Over time, there was an interest in Timex. We advertised as the first thing we had to do was to hire a PR firm and to hire an advertising agency. And the PR firm we hired was a company called Reuter and Finn. A guy named Bernie Mogalever was the PR director, and he handled our business. And he did an incredible job of public relations. Public relations is a lot less expensive to do than advertising, and he did a heck of a job of public relations. And we won the award that year for public relations. It's called the Silver Anvil Award that the company won that year for public relations. The second person we hired was an advertising agency, and we interviewed several agencies. Timex, of course, had been noted for a guy named who always said that takes a licking and keep on ticking. John Cameron Swayze was the kind of the PR person for the watch company, and we were looking for an advertising agency that could take our brand, take that brand, and move it into the computer business. And we interviewed several. One of the companies we interviewed was J. Walter Thompson. J. Walter Thompson was the agent at the time for Kodak, and Kodak was introducing, at that time that I was doing the interviewing, a little camera that had a disc cassette to it. You might have seen that camera over the years. And the agents, the executives on that account for J. Walter Thompson was a guy named Peter Schweitzer and a second guy named Bill Campbell. These names may not mean anything to you, but they were significant factors in the advertising business. Peter Schweitzer went on to become the agent in charge of Ford Motor Company's account and a lot of big accounts, as well as Timex. And my deal was I would select J. Walter Thompson as our agent. We had a pretty good sized budget, advertising television budget. We'd select them, but I wanted to get that team, Campbell and Schweitzer, and they agreed to do that, which meant that Campbell had to leave the Kodak account, and so they came to Timex, and Bill Campbell was an unusual guy. Let me give you a little bit of his background that I think would be of interest to you. 2 years before I met Bill Campbell, he was the head football coach at Columbia University. He had played football there as a student, and Bill was an incredible athlete. He was well known at Columbia, but he realized that he wasn't going to be able to get that white picket fence around his house that he wanted to get being a football coach at Columbia, because football, they were not Alabama, they were not Georgia now, as I would say, since we finished as world champion national champion twice in a row here. And but So he decided he needed to look elsewhere for a career, and he went to work for J. Walter Thompson. Bill was an incredible help to us. He came up with the slogan that we used, which was "The power is within your reach." Was the slogan that we used it to as our branding, and the power within our reach, was very successful in launching the product. Bill, I spent lots of time with him strategizing on marketing issues. He was more than just an advertising guy. And I, after a while, I needed a VP of marketing. And I went to Fred Olson, who owns Timex, and asked him if he would allow me to hire Bill Campbell as my VP of marketing. He looked at Bill's resume and said he was a football coach 2 years ago. I don't think he's the right guy. Well, that was mistake number one I think we made in the history of our computer company. I say it was mistake number one because shortly after that, Bill was approached by a guy named John Scully, who had met Bill before. John had just taken over as CEO of Apple Computer. Steve Jobs was on a little furlough at that time, and I just put it that way. And John Scully was brought in from PepsiCo to run Apple Computer, and he knew Bill Campbell, and he hired Bill Campbell to be the VP of marketing for Apple. Apple later, Bill joined the board of Apple as one of their board members, and then later, Bill became kind of the person that was known throughout Silicon Valley. Although he came from the East Coast, he went to Silicon Valley and lit things up there. He got to become kind of an advisor to a lot of the people that became legends at Silicon Valley. He was an advisor to Apple, of course. He was an advisor to Google when they started out. He was an advisor to the board of Amazon. And this he was given credit, Bill Campbell was given credit for being the guy that provided the launching pad for Google's success and Amazon's and Apple. He was a very big advocate of Steve Jobs and was instrumental in getting him brought back into the company after he started his own computer company and came back with his Lisa computer. Eric Schmitz, the founder of Google, a couple of years ago wrote a book on the life of Bill Campbell. It's called The $1 Trillion Coach. And if you haven't read that book, I would encourage all of you to read it. It's quite a book. The companies that Bill Campbell was involved with after we didn't hire him as a coach at market to be the marketing director of Timex Computers, he was instrumental in building companies, according to Eric Schmitz and others out on the West Coast. And the book, as I said, was called The $1 Trillion Coach, the story of Bill Campbell. Bill died a couple of years ago. He had cancer, and he died. But I was a friend of his until he died. He was quite a guy. It's interesting. Steve Jobs actually did his eulogy and spoke at his funeral, which is kind of neat. That was a mistake that I think we made that could possibly have extended our time in business beyond 1984. I think that was one of the steps that took place. We had distribution and all over places that other people never thought about distributing computers to. And as David said earlier, we've achieved a 28% market share, and we did that in the first 5 months that we were in business, competing against companies that have been in the market for some time, and the product was off and running. Of course, the first product that we introduced was this little product that I have in my hand here. Let's see if I can get it in front of the screen. The 1000. This 1000 that I have in front of me is an interesting product. I think you'd find it very interesting. As you know, we built products in Dundee, Scotland. We built them in Lisbon, Portugal, and later we built some in Seoul, Korea. And we were contacted by the Smithsonian, and they asked us about our computer because it was monumental. It was the first computer to sell for less than $100, and they were asking us for one of our computers. We had a computer that was made in Portugal, and one that was made in Dundee, Scotland. Serial number 1 of each of those locations. Serial number 1, and I have in my hand here serial number 1. If I can get it up here, you can see that's number 1 right there. This is the first computer made in Dundee, Scotland. The one that we gave to the Smithsonian was serial number 1, made in Lisbon, Portugal. And that's today sitting alongside the ENIAC computer at the Smithsonian. And somewhere I've got a picture. Let's see if I can. This is a picture of me and the curator at the Smithsonian when we donated that computer, and it's still sitting alongside the ENIAC. You can go to the Smithsonian, and you can see that computer at the Smithsonian. It's kind of interesting. When I was with IBM, I installed lots of computers, had 16K of memory on it, maybe 8K even, 360 Model 20. And they were punch card computers, and we would do complete applications for savings and loans, banks, manufacturing firms, doing inventory control, putting their accounting systems on the system on these small computers. And to have a computer like this, ours had 2K, of course. Clive's original one, which is the ZX81, only had 1K. But of course, it used this module here to, if I can get it in front of me, that was the thing that turned it into a 16K computer. And so it was revolutionary. I like to think about it in today's terms. You'd call this, we were a disruptor. That's basically the purpose that we serve. We were a disruptor in the marketplace. We created real problems, and that term is used a lot today when you look at technology coming into the marketplace. I mean, you'd have to say the biggest disruptor in the marketplace today probably was the internet, and that certainly changed the landscape of technology. Today, I think artificial intelligence, it seems to be breaking into this, and things like augmented reality, virtual reality, these kind of things are starting to take root, I think, and they probably will be the disruption that we're talking about in a few years from now. But this computer, I think, was the disruptor, and it turned out to be a disruptor that didn't work to our benefit. I say that because other people in the marketplace, TI had a computer that they initially brought on the marketplace for something in the range of $300 or $400. It was primarily used for games. It had color capability. Ours didn't initially, of course. And we Clive initially introduced the ZX81 to be a serious computer. He wanted it to be something serious as opposed to being a game playing machine. And that's the thing that we did. But the thing that I was most excited about, what we did and the contribution we made, I think we built one of the biggest cottage industries in the shortest period of time in history. Most of our software were developed by third-party people. And these were people who would put together software on a cassette tape, and we would take and put our brand on it, package it, put it in our distribution channel, and pay them a royalty on this. And we had literally hundreds of little cottage software people that were building these programs. This happened to be one called ViewCap. This was our version of a spreadsheet. Another one. Here's Algebra 1. We were big in the literacy market, of course, and Algebra 1, we use that in our schools. Here's Algebra 2. This is more advanced version of Algebra 1. Statistics, strategy football. We had one that was for the flight simulator. That was a big deal back in those days. And it was a pretty sophisticated. I introduced the flight simulator at the Boston Computer Conference back in 1982, and it was amazing what this little 16K computer could do with a flight simulator. Any rate, I'm kind of going around a lot of different circles here. I mentioned that we were a disruptor, but after a while, people started dropping the prices on their computers. TI's computer, as I mentioned earlier, was initially selling for $300 to $400. They dropped their price down to less than $100. And of course, their computer was a lot more sophisticated than our little black and white computer, and it was we had to drop our prices also. Our computer to build in the quantities that we were building in, I think that, and you can maybe correct me, Joe, if you want to, it was in the $16, $17 range is what it cost us to build the computer at that time, $16, $17. And of course, we were selling them at wholesale into the retail marketplace for about $65. And so the margin was $15, $16 up to $65. And then they were selling for $100. I think that was kind of the program we had. But then we had to drop the prices down, so our margins were decreased. And towards the end of the lifespan of Timex, we started building computers in Korea. We built a lot of the technology there, and we decided we needed to go into to China because the labor cost there was a lot less than anywhere else that you could have. And we set up our meeting with China, and this was in the early days of opening up China. President Nixon had just opened it up a few years earlier than that, and people were just going into China for the first time. And we had, of course, representatives in Hong Kong, and they arranged for us to have meetings in China. And the meeting was set up. We met, the group met, and our entourage met in Hong Kong, and made our way over to Guangzhou. That's what we call it today, but it was called Canton at that time, Canton, to meet with the leaders, technology, people from the government of China. And our intentions were to get them to manufacture our products over there, but also to be able to distribute in China at that time, the large market. And I went into Guangzhou on a hydrofoil up the Canton River, and it was kind of interesting to see the technology that existed in China at that time. As I was going up the Canton River, I'd look out one side, and there'd be rice paddies on one side, and they'd be harvested or worked by water buffaloes. That was the technology that they had. On the other side, there might be a tractor once in a while, but they were 1920 version tractors of the U.S. They had big cog wheels on them, and a lot different than the tractors you see from John Deere and our companies here in the U.S. today. But the technology wasn't there. When we landed in Hong Kong, there were no cars on the street. They had very few cars. They only had bicycles at that time. And so we went in. The person that I was to meet with, his name was Song, S-O-N-G. And he came to Guangzhou from Beijing. He was billed as being the chief technology person of the whole of China that we were meeting with. And our intentions were to sell the product there, but also to build product in China. It was a kind of an interesting time. It's the first time that I had experience in dealing with the Chinese, and I learned a new thing called the gambei. Gambei is, you may recall Richard Nixon. Maybe some of you might be old enough to know when Richard Nixon went to China with Henry Kissinger. He apparently they did gambei to him, which basically is a drink that, in our case, they asked us to bring in brandy, and we brought in brandy, which is not a weak drink, and that's what they served in the gambei. And but they did that to Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon had too many gambeis, and he got a little bit loot in the meeting. So it was an embarrassment to it. They hauled him out of there. In our case, I was warned about it by our folks in Hong Kong, and so I was kind of modest about my gambei. But at any rate, we had meetings, several days of meetings, as a matter of fact, and I was asked to make presentations at the university there in Guangzhou, and they had no computer. They had absolutely no computers in China at that time. At least in that location, they had no computers. And I gave demonstrations of the 1000, and they were amazed at what this could do, and they just imagined it. One of the things that they really would like to have, a lot of people had children that they wanted to be educated in the United States. They wanted immigration. That was a big deal in China at that time. And they were talking a lot about immigration. But I thought things were going well. We were scheduled after 3 or 4 days of meetings to go to Beijing to meet with the people there. And I don't know who that would have been, but I would imagine the prime minister was going to be involved in what they had in mind. And we were scheduled to go. And the day before we were to go, Mr. Song and he leaned over to me. He was sitting to my left and leaned over to me to whisper it in my ear. In Timex, in the gyroscope business, and I kind of froze. Yes, we were in the gyroscope business at that time. And I don't know, well, you can probably talk about this more, Joe, than I can, but are they still in the gyroscope business, Timex? Joe? No?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know anything about gyroscope business.
They were in
but
they were
yeah, but over here, it completely disappeared. So only a commercial representation now.
Okay. We were making gyroscopes at that time. Gyroscopes are the guidance systems for rockets. It turned out, in my estimation at that time, and we we're not selling those kind of products to countries that we weren't totally friendly with, nicely. And it was obvious to me that their interest was more in the gyroscopes than it was in the computer industry. We didn't go to Beijing. We did not go to Beijing because at that time it was illegal. I would have, if I'd have been trying to negotiate something in that discussion, it could have been something that wouldn't have been good for my career. And so we ended up packing up our goods, never signed a deal with China, and we came back home. And a few months later, we announced that we were discontinuing our business. But that was a milestone, I think, in the business. We made the right decision for the country, maybe not the right decision for the company, but it was the right decision for us. And that was another one of the milestones that I mentioned, Bill Campbell being one of them. In fact, we didn't hire him. And then this particular decision was a very, very big decision for the company. And I ended up from there in December, January of 1984, we announced we were getting out of the business. I ended up going down, being asked to start a venture capital firm in Atlanta. I'd lived here with ITEL, the company I was with in the leasing business, and they asked me to come down here and help start a venture capital firm, which I did. And I set my business up at the Advanced Technology Development Center at Georgia Tech, and we started 30 new companies with that venture capital company that I started in technology. And at that time, Georgia was an agrarian state. It was primarily in the peanut business, and that was the main industry here. And today, we are the top fintech company, say in our region in the world. We do more data processing and financial technology than any other place in the world here in Georgia now. And it all loomed out of that incubator at Georgia Tech that I was involved with. And from venture capital, I became an inventor. This was 1998. We're talking about now, and my son graduated from Wharton Business School, and during his final year at Wharton, I said, this thing called the internet seems like it's got some legs to it. And so I said, I want you to start, studying it. And we spent the better part of a year, 1998, studying the internet, what was working, what wasn't working, what was and what should be. And we came up with technology, and as you can see, this if I can, right here, this plaque right here, if I can get my finger on. That's one of 7 patents that my son and I own on syndicating commerce on the internet. That's the way to turn eyeballs into money. And we've licensed that technology. We started the company around it. We were on 54% of the sites after we started the company. Whoops. Yeah. We had a presence on 54% of all the internet sites, about 2,000 in existence at that time, selling products on sites that otherwise were primarily content sites. And content sites were like newspapers. They couldn't sell their newspapers to people because people weren't willing to pay for content at that time on the internet. And they were looking for ways to monetize those eyeballs, and we gave them a way to do that. And today, there are literally millions of transactions every day that are using our technology to monetize visitors. If you look at the travel industry today, companies like Orbitz and Travelocity and Priceline and these companies, they're using the technology, license to use the technology that we invented back in 1998 that really transformed the internet into a way to make some money on it. So that's what I've been doing post Timex. Kind of segue there. Anyway, I've rambled on, and if any of you have any questions or any make comments on, I'd certainly be happy to take them.
So yeah, we have tons and tons of questions, as you might imagine. So when you were the VP and the COO of Timex Computer Corporation, what was the relationship to the parent Timex Corporation? And
I worked for Fred Olson.
Okay.
And also, well, I said that's who I worked for when I started. Okay. Timex was interested in getting into multiple things. They got into the healthcare business too. At that time, they had a product that was a blood pressure measurement machine that you could use in your home. And
scale
products that they had, they still selling those. At any rate, and they brought in a guy that I ended up reporting into. He was kind of the group president, I guess you'd call it at that time. They brought him in from Texas Instruments. His name was Kirk Pond. Kirk still a great friend of mine. In fact, my daughter, when we moved from Middlebury, Waterbury area back to Georgia, my oldest daughter, was in her senior year at high school, and we didn't want to put her into a school where last year they have to make new friends, and we left her there, and she lived with Kirk Pond and his family for that last year.
So you mentioned when we talked earlier that you had gone over and done the negotiations for Timex to get the manufacturing rights, right, for the ZX81.
I don't think I said that. I was involved in getting the relationships.
Okay.
But the contract, Timex was manufacturing that product.
Right. Okay.
They had a Dundee plant, and that's kind of how the relationship really started there. And then we decided it might be something Fred Olson decided it was something that we probably should start to sell ourselves. And that's when I came into it, right.
Okay. And, I have a personal theory, and that is that, Clive was really interested in his flat screen TV, right? And it seemed to me like a lot of what he did was underwriting his effort to get a flat screen TV to work.
Right.
And was Timex, were you guys, did you have some sort of, once Clive managed to sort that out, did you guys have some sort of, agreement to manufacture that thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
We obviously had a relationship with them, and it's a good relationship. As far as that particular product was concerned, no. I mean,
okay.
Flat screens it didn't happen,
right?
In a way that was. It happened after we closed our business there.
Yeah. Well, and I remember reading.
Can I add something, David?
Yeah.
Sorry. Because the last TV set from Clive Sinclair was assembled in Dundee. So the FTV, the flat TV version from 84, I think, was assembled in Dundee. But one thing that I have, and I just need to find it to show it, is that Timex had a brochure, a flyer about a flat TV module, which the thing I don't know if it is technologically speaking related to the one from Sinclair or not, but it's pretty obvious to me that in a certain moment in time, Timex start pitching the possibility of selling flat TV modules I'm not saying Timex in USA, of course, but I'm saying that exists because I have the brochure. I can find it and show it in a few minutes.
Very cool.
That was
Give me a second now.
You know, our products were hooked up to the television.
Yeah.
It was this was our connectivity.
Right. Yeah, the old RF switch box.
Yep. But you know, there were products that were starting to come on the market before we closed the business up. I think they came out of maybe somebody in Pittsburgh or somewhere in that area. I think developed the first flat screen, and you know, it was obvious that that's where the market was going. And there were, you know, like I'm sitting here talking to you now, that's what happened with the fact.
Yeah, you don't have a monster CRT on your desk anymore.
Well, I got one of those, but I don't use it.
When I talked to George Grimm a while back, he told me that Bill Gates had talked to you guys about putting Microsoft Basic on the Timex computers. Do you recall that?
We did. I don't think those conversations went very far.
Right. And when you guys decided to produce the 2068, you know, you saw the spectrum coming, right? And at some point you made a decision to jump on that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The 2068, I mean, we designed that the structure of that was done by our technology. And this cartridge technology, that was part of the Timex technology. It came from Timex, you know, the one thing that I think Clive was very smart about, the functional keyboard that he developed, even for the TS1, the Spectrum, and then TS1000, that to me, that was a very powerful thing for him to do. You know, to be able to do programming by hitting a control key in one stroke, and you had a command there. Mm-hmm. And that we did that on all the computers, but this and the Spectrum, which we turned into the 1500. You know, this one has a chiclet. The 1500 has a chiclet type of a keyboard, which is one of the biggest challenge we had with the TS1000 was the keyboard being Mylar keyboard, and the second biggest problem we had was this connectivity right here.
Yeah.
that was a big issue because it would come unplugged in the middle of a program. And that was a big challenge we had. We fixed that problem on the Spectrum and on the 1500 and the 2068.
You originally were thinking about a 16K RAM and a 48K RAM version of the 2068, and you had these, you know, various model numbers floated around, and at one point the model number 2072 was floated, you know, referring to the total amount of memory. And then the story goes, you called it in some meeting or some presentation, you called it the 2068, right? And folks were like, where did that come from? And you know, the apocryphal story is that, you know, you just said, you know, it just came out of my head and it sounds good. Can you tell me about that?
That's exactly the case. It should have been the 2072, actually, right, because it was 48K of onboard memory, and then the cartridge itself, I think, had 24K, mm-hmm. Okay? And that adds up to 72. And of course, the programs were operating out of this cartridge.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is we developed this as well. This was a Timex development here.
That little cartridge, yeah.
Technology. not
But sorry, can I complicate things even more?
okay.
Because in the meantime, David, I'm connected from my phone, so I can't share the document, but I sent you the brochure on the Flat TV to your Facebook Messenger, if you can share afterwards. Okay. But regarding this matter, what I wanted to complicate more was that I heard a similar story, but not mixing up 2072 with 2068. Instead, the story would be, I don't know where I read it first, to be honest, but it would be that the computer was going to be called 2048, but I'm talking about the same computer. Now,
that's true.
I do have a press release that shows the computer still with a label saying Timex Sinclair 2048. The document is from Bernie Moglever, Susan O'Sullivan, New York office to Timex computer.
Yes.
I'll send it to David right away for him to share if he wants.
That 2048 was the original number. We could not get, and that was based on the spectrum. Okay, and the spectrum was 2048. The Federal Trade Commission, as I recall, we had a problem with the spectrum in the FTC here, and I think that.
Yep.
With that, we made a lot of modifications, including coming out with this. Okay, so we did a lot of good things. We had a better format. We had better keyboard. It was a better product that we were able to introduce. But if you go back and read or view that video that I've made to the Boston Computer Society that I think you guys posted.
Yep.
I talked about that particular issue, the fact that it was originally called the 2048 that ended up being 68.
Okay.
Okay, that's the story.
David, I don't know if you can show the files, because as we are streaming also to YouTube, it would allow everyone to see. So I sent you two things. One is that press release paper but I didn't want to get the, let's say, the original. I'm showing you a sheet from a magazine where I publish an article about this, explaining this story. But you can use it from a Portuguese magazine called Spectrum, which is Spectrum basically. And the other one was the brochure on the flat TV module from Timex.
Right. So this what you showed, I'm going to try to share my screen, but what
sorry
you showed,
guys, but I connected from the phone, so now I don't access the hard drive from the phone.
Is a press release from Reuter.
Reuter fan.
Thank you. And we saw this information in the US. We saw this information in,
you can zoom in. Yeah.
In all of our meetings. Can I? Yes, I can.
If you zoom in, you can. It has quality to see.
There we go. And so, right, and from Bernie Moglever, right. We saw this printed in, say, Creative Computing and some of the other computing magazines at the time. This information.
But if you zoom in, I don't know if you guys.
It says 2048 on it.
Yeah, it says clearly 2048. Okay.
Yep.
Just
well,
okay.
But
perfect.
also, Joao, if you look closely at these lines that are on the keyboard, those are Sharpie. You can see the shakiness in the hand of whoever drew those lines, right? So this is clearly a mock-up. And what's really obvious is this far left line over here. It's it's really clear that this is a done with Sharpie.
and drawn kind of thing.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Nice.
And one of the things that Timex also put out in 83-ish was some marketing materials that had illustrations, suitable for newspapers or magazines, whatever, sort of line drawings of both the 16 and the 48, which I've uploaded to archive.org.
Over here we have articles in newspapers about computers that never were produced, like the 3256, which was an advanced version in Portugal that they did not conclude. So it doesn't surprise me. It was normal practice. Everyone would do that. So
yes, absolutely. And I'll show this. I'll share this other one that you shared with me. Okay. This is the there it is. So
this was on the paperwork of Álvaro Oliveira, kind of, let's say, he was a consultant for Timex Portugal. It was kind of number 2 over here. And among many thousands of paperwork, there was this brochure from Timex about this module. What I don't know is if this module is somehow related to the one used on the Sinclair flat TV.
No, because this is
I
from
never
1986, and the flat TV is a bent
84, 85.
The flat TV is a bent CRT module.
Okay.
This looks like it's a some kind of an LCD, maybe. Although it does say flat CRT.
Yeah. And if you look at it, it's not so different.
Yeah.
And remember, the flat TV from Sinclair was assembled in Dundee. I don't have doubts about that. Okay, but that was just curiosity.
So you mentioned the keyboard, Danny. The difference between the keyboard on the 1500, which was inherited from the Spectrum.
Right.
How did you guys where did you arrive at that plastic keycap keyboard? And part of my question is, their brother put out a typewriter that has an almost identical keyboard. I don't know if you were aware of that.
I'm not. Probably you could ask George that.
Okay.
When you get him on.
Yeah.
I can't answer that question, but
Well, Danny, if you don't mind me stepping in here, you actually answered that question in your presentation to the Boston Computer Society. When Ryan and I were watching that yesterday, you actually did say that the computer's keyboard was from a brother typewriter.
Oh,
yeah.
I missed that point.
Yeah, there you are. Yeah, you answered it for us 40 years ago. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
This is a modem. This
oh my Lord.
It's compatible modem. And it was one of the dreams that I had was that we had a computer here that was inexpensive, and banks at that time were trying to get new clients. And I felt that they could, in fact, attach their clients to the computers. This was back in a time when they never dreamed of being able to do these kind of things, attach their clients to the computer and do some of the things that they're doing now online, thanks to the internet. But this was kind of our first version, prototype, if you would, of the modem, Hayes compatible modem, which was the first, of course, successful modem to be introduced. And by the way, that guy's from Atlanta, Georgia, too, where I'm at.
The Hayes folks.
Anyway,
that's good.
Anything else? I've got to drop off here in a second, but it's just I'm just absolutely floored that there's so much interest in what we did 40 years ago. It's just I think we made a contribution to. I see so many people that had their first experience with computers.
Yep.
And they say, "My God."
Then, if your time is limited, can I just try to throw you with two questions, because I think they are very important to get the overall picture. So, and they are not technical or anything like that.
Good.
So one was, I heard, so one was related to the withdrawal of the computing business. So when you guys decided to step back from it in US, and what I would like to try to validate was somehow the reasons for it, if it was just the competition or more than that. But I'll tell you why. Everyone that I spoke always refers that as let's say the official version. But Álvaro Oliveira, so before he died, I had a meeting with him, and in a long conversation, he told me that the story could be a little bit different. So he argued that he was very close to the people in US, that's what he claimed, and that there was an opportunity. I know this is not from the Timex Computer Corporation, it's probably from the main one, but there was supposedly someone trying to buy the distribution channel that you guys had. So as someone else that wanted to use it to sell computers. And so unlike what is normally said, which is Timex lost money from the computing business, it could have been a little bit different. Is there any fundament on this theory or not?
I certainly wasn't involved with any of those discussions about the third party coming in and wanting to use our channel. The reason we went out of business was the fact that when the margins went down the way they did, we made money initially. That's a misnomer to say that we didn't make money. But when the margins became such that they weren't, like anything else, that was a business decision. We had to lower our prices to a level that, and there were issues that we had to confront too. I mean, when you introduce a new product into your distribution channel, and your distribution channel has older products there, like the 1000 and 1500, they're going to want to upgrade their inventory, and they're going to want us to take back the products that you had. And we had to do some of that. And we had to figure out some way to make money off of the products that we took back. And we did find out how to do that. I contracted with a barter company, and we actually took product and back, and we traded the product for advertising credits, so that we could advertise the products. Basically, and the products that we used in trade was distributed to areas where we were not doing business, South America, for instance.
Yep.
And that's how a lot of the products got shipped down there. That was a huge idea. Kind of interesting also. I got a call after I went into venture capital from Bill Campbell, who at the time was with Apple, and they ran through the similar type problems with the Apple IIc. They had a distribution out there with Apple IIcs, and he called me and said, "Tell me what you guys did." What they did. Sent me one of the Apple IIcs that I gave to my son, who was a freshman at Georgetown at the time. He got his first computer from Bill Campbell, which was one they ended up trading. And the company that I was doing business with for this barter arrangement, they took all these Apple IIc products and they used them. Apple used them for advertising, and it was kind of interesting. But yeah, that was the biggest challenge we had. The market went down. We had to take back new products, products that were still in distribution, and they kind of had Timex with the short hairs. It was great that we had a distribution channel, but this disturbed our watch business too. They were also watch customers, and there were other people from Hong Kong and Korea that were building watches that retailers had the ability to buy at that time. I mean, that's why we basically entered the computer business, is because we had distribution channels and we had more competition in the watch business. And but that, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it answers. It answers, and it helps me to try to put the pieces all together. We try in the museum in Portugal. One thing I explain to people is that we keep learning, and so every time we learn some new details, we try to update our baseline to ensure we have the most up-to-date story. The final question is very simple to me. The final from me is, so you mentioned a lot Bill Gates and Steve Jobs before. Now, Álvaro Oliveira did mention the participation in a certain conference in US. I never found which conference it was, where they were, the three of us, but mostly the conversation was with Bill Gates, and where supposedly Bill Gates said in public that the merit of putting computers in our houses was not from Microsoft, was from Timex and Sinclair. Are you aware of this ever being said? Because this is, I think, very important, of course.
Well, we certainly, Apple sold its computers for business reasons.
Yeah.
Atari and Commodore sold their computers for entertainment. And we really had some serious, if you look at some of these labels here, household budgeting. These are the basic rudimentary things that people weren't doing at the time. This is a home application. And I do think that we led the path to go into that marketplace. Clive was right with his vision to have a serious computer here, not a game computer. Although, obviously with the 28, we introduced games, and because we wanted to make sure we had market beyond what our original vision was. But I think I never heard Steve or Bill Gates.
Bill, yeah.
Bill Gates
Okay, so you never heard it, but it's aligned with what happened. Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, if I mentioned Ben Rosen always felt that Timex's interest in the computer business, that the lasting impact is going to have is going to be helpful to Apple and IBM at that time. And I might say this too. IBM, I think, made the biggest mistake ever made in the computer industry. I knew that Don Estridge, who headed that division, I knew him too. He was part of this consortium. And Don Estridge felt that the time to market was the most important thing. They had to get there before Apple was able to take over the entire marketplace. And in doing that, he gave away two things. He gave away the software because it was an open system, and he gave away the chip to Intel. The two places that make money, everything else was commodity. And that's why they're not in business today. I mean, that was a huge mistake. He felt they needed to get to the market today. And the way to get there was use other people's technology. Apple, on the other hand, used proprietary technology. And that's why they're where they are today.
Very well. Thank you.
Danny, can I impress upon you to stay a few more minutes to answer some questions from other folks?
You bet.
Okay. So folks, use the hand raising thing with the reactions at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
David, let me just tell you, we also have a couple of questions in the YouTube chat if you want to check it or not. One was about Nigel Searle, and there was some others. So just for you to know. Okay. But please moderate.
Okay, Nigel. Nigel was our intermediary between Clive and Timex. I think Nigel is now living in Florida.
Yes, he is.
And I spoke to Nigel a couple of years ago. In fact, when Clive died, and he was a tremendous guy for us. He was a big help. He was a guy that could translate what Clive was thinking into words that we understood.
Stuart, you're up. You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Danny.
Hey,
I had a tiny company I formed in 1983. I was an electrical engineer, and I had 4 prior jobs, like in aerospace. But I formed this company to support the Timex TS1000 DX81 because I thought, this was going to be so much fun. I always liked electronics as a hobby. I looked into Brooklyn Closeout Corporation, Mr. Freed, and I think you almost half answered the question I had, what that relationship was like, because I got lucky in that after Timex started to pull out, Mr. Freed was getting some Timex surplus stuff, but the Timex stuff was small for him. I used to be there when 40-foot trailers would pull up with probably this kind of product you were talking about, maybe an old alarm clock or other Timex product that was probably a past model. And his claim to fame, I guess, actually he wasn't famous. The whole point of his business was he could take this product and ship it out of the US market to people he knew. He was an Orthodox Jew, and he knew Orthodox Jews in like South Africa and South America. And he was the least technical person. He had no idea what a computer or most of the stuff he sold was, but he knew he could sell it for more than he bought it for. That's the only question he needed answering. So anyway, do you remember that organization? Did that ever come up as far as you're concerned? Brooklyn Closeout?
It was a fairly large barter company that we dealt with. And quite frankly, I tried to, when we were trying to find a solution to this, what are we going to do with this inventory? We knew we needed to turn it into cash. We needed to turn it into something that we could use, and advertising was the thing we could use. And this is something that, to trade one for the other, that this was kind of like giving the arms out of your sleeves out of your vest. But what we wanted to make sure was that it didn't end up coming back to compete with us, and that's why it had to go. It had to go out of the country, and that's probably what Mr. Freed did. This isn't the same Freed that the money deal lately, FTX, is it?
No, I don't believe no, not the current one. No, probably no direct. Well, in the family tree, maybe. And the other question I had was, can you comment at all on a repair center was Timex running a repair center in Connecticut? Because at some point I bought a lot of stuff from either Sinclair or Timex when they finally got rid of the repair parts.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. So people who built those kits and had a problem with them, did they send them back somewhere?
I think those went to Arkansas, didn't they? Little Rock.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Danny, one of the things that people have an undying curiosity about is the bus expansion unit for the 2068. I don't know if you recall this thing, but it would have another cartridge slot in it, and it would have 4 expansion ports inside for expanding the memory and potentially hooking up either a stringy floppy, like the micro drive, or a real floppy disk.
Yeah, the micro drives.
Do spill the tea.
Yeah. I mean, we had those. I didn't talk about those. Quite frankly, I came into the marketplace when probably the first way of storing data was on a tape, but it wasn't an endless tape like the micro drive was. He tried to integrate a tape system and a disk system. It wasn't the most elegant thing he did, I might say. I'll just leave it there.
But Joelle was showing me some documentation, and actually I went back and looked at some of the drawings that Gary Grimes did, and one of Gary's drawings illustrated a bus expansion unit with a couple what might have been floppy drives on it, and then something else on top of that. And Joelle showed me some documentation that showed that a fair amount of thinking had been done on that product. Do you have any idea how far along it got in terms of building it?
No.
Okay.
And David, if I may, because in that document we saw the thing that kind of surprised us was the reference to, at least the Portuguese team was talking about, to the drawings of John Maliscas. Is this a name that Danny remembers, and was he close? No, doesn't remember. Okay, we need to keep digging in that part.
All right. Anybody else want to ask a question?
Adam,
I'll ask a question.
Let me just
go ahead.
Sorry, very quickly, Danny. And you asked about Tony Gomes. I gave to you 1 or 2 other names. Anyone else you remember interacting with the Portuguese unit?
In Portugal, yeah. But nobody else I can think of right now.
Okay, no problem.
40 years is a long time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Adam, you had a question?
I do. We've been asking a lot of technical questions. I was hoping maybe we could look back at like your time that you spent at Timex and how you just feel about it generally, and if you're proud of like what the computers were able to do by accomplishing, like getting out to people for, like you've said a few times, for under $100, and how do you feel that was an impact on the other computers of the industry? You did say it started the cottage industry, for instance, and like Texas Instruments had to lower their prices, and so did Commodore. And do you think that how do you feel about all that in general and in your place in the history of computers?
Well, let me just make a comment about Texas Instruments and Commodore dropping their prices. Texas Instruments, they dropped their price down to $99, a computer that initially sold for $250, $300. And we took that product apart piece by piece and priced it out. And in quantities of 100,000, the piece part cost more than what they were selling the product for. Their whole strategy was that they were going to make their money on software, and that never materialized. And that was the mistake that they made. It's interesting, none of these companies are in the business today. Neither Coleco, neither Commodore, neither TI, none of the companies are in the business today. And it's all, I did a speech to Future Computing, which was at the time a big spokesperson for this industry. And in that speech, I talked about kamikaze pricing. And that's basically what they were doing. They were lowering their prices to a level that doesn't make sense. They thought they could, and their model was the Gillette razor blade. You give it a handle and make your money on the blade, and that strategy didn't work very well.
And Danny, Kirk came from TI.
He came from TI. Kirk's a friend of mine. I like Kirk a lot.
And so did Rex Naden, who
yes, he did.
Was very involved in that computer.
Yeah, thanks for sending those. Rex and I have fond memories of Rex. We used to have meetings with Fred Olsen at his place in Scotland. He had a estate up there called Forest, and Forest was just what the name says. It was a lot of trees on thousands of acres of land, and he had a cottage up there that was really a castle. And it was an amazing place. Fred's family came out of Norway, and they had a lot of money going into the watch business. And he was a very interesting character himself. But between Fred, I'm not sure who was more interested, Fred or Clive. They in many ways, they were cut from the same tape. People like Rex Naden and Kirk Pond. These are people that Rex came out of TI. They were in the watch business also, but at any rate, I appreciate you sending me Rex's contact information.
Danny, thank you very much for your time. I hope you'll come back.
I hope to, and if there's anything you need or going forward, feel free to pass my email address out, and I'm happy to continue the conversation, if not online like this, but with email. And I'm just delighted that there's such interest in this, and it means a lot to me. I think we've made a contribution to the industry. Maybe not the way we had hoped it would turn out, but at the end of the day, I think we made a difference in this marketplace, and you guys continuing the work that you're doing here are certainly making that even longer lasting than what we did.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I appreciate that.
You're absolutely correct. You made a huge mark. A huge mark, obviously on us, but on a lot of people who aren't even here, whose entry into the computer science industry is hinged on that computer. So yeah, thank you for doing that, and thank you for coming. And we will certainly have follow-up questions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joao, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we actually just talked about? And let's see.
we had some questions also going on in the chat, but I asked people to understand that we had a very limited time, so we'll try to deal with anything that we can to answer afterwards, as he suggested. So I think we have a strategy. So yes, whatever. I don't know if you want to go to the bus expansion unit, and then you can show that document, or whatever you want to do, David. I'll leave it up to you.
Well, a lot of folks have questions about that bus expansion unit.
Yeah.
And I am manually going through and asking each of you to unmute, because I don't know how to do it in mass. So
can I ask a question to everyone here, and to David maybe specifically, since you have so much general knowledge about what was talked about, and something, maybe you all knew this, I didn't know this. It almost seems like to me he said something, and I'm not sure if I took this the wrong way, but did he say basically that they decided not to sell the Timex computers anymore because they would have had to sell gyroscopes to the Chinese? That was kind of the exchange there, and he basically is like, so since we couldn't keep the cost down, I mean, he didn't say that explicitly, but is that what he meant?
Well,
no, that was specific about China.
Right, I understand that, but like, since he was the company, I mean, were they were going to be able to sell it for such a small, for less money? Like, was that what he was insinuating there?
Well, so he was talking in terms of, they had factories, as he said, Dundee, Portugal, and Korea, right? And
France,
they did go to China to look for, to do manufacturing there, because the cost of manufacturing was super, super low, cost of labor. And he wrote a little description about this on his Facebook page that was a little bit more detailed. And basically, as he said, they went through several days worth of meetings and whatever, and then this guy says to him, so you guys make gyroscopes, right? Because that's what, and he's, like he said, he froze, and his interpretation, I think his interpretation was absolutely correct, was, and he says this in his Facebook post, was that China was not interested in the computer. China was interested in the gyroscope, right? And at that point, he's like, no, we're out. Literally. I mean, they did not go to Beijing, right? And so that was part of it, right? And then the other part of that is that, as the retail price came down, the wholesale price, what they could get, in terms of the wholesaling came down, but the cost of manufacturing did not come down. And so, they were, in essence, a victim of their own pricing success.
Yeah. But David, for example, and I think this makes it more clear to me over here, about why is it for you guys over there? It seems it was kind of strange that they kept going in Portugal, and if it was done with permission or not. I think this is pretty obvious, because that price reduction was in US. So that was a context of the US market. So Timex decided, okay, the US market no longer makes sense, which was the biggest one, of course. But the other guys that were in markets that were more protected didn't have this issue. They kept going. And that's why we kept going in Portugal, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And so to your point, Joao, at the time, the folks who had a little bit of information were sort of doing this tea leaf reading, right? When was it Tony came over to the US to try to get some products certified, it was sort of a mystery about the relationship there, right? Where did this guy come from? Who is this Portugal place? And nobody had any information. Stuart went to Portugal, and there was
that's years later, right?
Years, right, exactly.
Stuart can clarify that, but I think it's years later.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
But in '84, when Tony wanted to try to keep selling the stuff, the question was, who is this person? And yay, it's still being made somewhere.
But the thing is, they were doing it together for many time. I understand, and I showed you yesterday, for example, the reorganization of the computing department that Lou Gailey sends. And obviously, the guys in Portugal were not directors in US computing business, but they were kept informed. They were reporting to people in that team. So they were working together very closely. But this is in the computing, because I have other examples. For example, I told you about the electroluminescence technology, which was being done directly with the Olsen family and guys in US. So outside of the computing business. So there were many interactions. And so I think I don't know, for us over here, this was more or less normal to keep going. And I understand it better now because of the reason why they left the market.
Yeah. Well, I want to get it a little more nuanced that, that the spectrum really didn't come here, right? Timex was probably going to do that, and they probably would have lasted a little longer because they would have had some cash to deal with that. But they, we all know that the reasons why the spectrum really wasn't going to fly in the US, right? So there's all this development cost of the 2068, right? They started this apparently, talking to Grimes and, in early 83, right? Maybe late 82, early 83. So you have to look at when did they start selling the 1000 for $99 and were making, right? They were making $70 a unit, right? If it cost $20 to make and they were selling it wholesale for, what did he say, $65? That's $50 at least, right? That's a pretty good margin when you're selling, tens of thousands of these things. But, that market, I think, really, like you said, TI dropped their price, right? TI dropped their price, and Commodore didn't go that deep, but their margins were really, I think, taking a hit in 83, right? Here they are too, developing this whole new product. So think about all the costs for the development of the 2068, right? Where's that money coming from to develop that product? Right, it's coming from dwindling 1,000 and 1,500 sales, right? Not only that, but when it came out, it was not fully baked, right? We all kind of know that, right? They needed to come out with it so that they could have something to sell to make that profit, right? And I think it just got to the point where, it just, you can't squeeze a turnip only so much, and then the development cost for the 2068 and the way the computer market was going at the time. And I think that's probably kind of why, Timex decided, at least here in America, to pull out. Right. I think,
Carl, it's funny what you're saying, because in a way I see a resemblance with the QL. Probably the QL with more manufacturing problems.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of a resemblance with the story of the QL.
Yeah, especially in Britain, right? Because that really never came here to the US, at least not in a Timex guise, right? Obviously Sinclair was selling them directly, but still, yeah, you're right. It was just such an expensive computer.
But Timex Portugal was, I'm not sure if I should be proud of this, but Timex Portugal was collaborating on some things on the QL, at least some testing, because I have memos between Timex and Sinclair about delays on the validation of the system. So, and that's something that even I forget. It's very often I don't think about the QL and think about Timex, but the fact is that there was some collaboration.
Yeah.
Another thing we couldn't address in this call because it didn't make sense, but I think it's something very, very interesting, which is the connection between Sinclair, and I mean Sinclair, the inventor, and his endeavors, and Timex kept somehow strong. And I'll give you an example. There's a cordless phone sold by a company in UK called Shea Communications, which started the technology. The beginning of the technology was initially developed at Sinclair Research, and then they spun it off. And I have a book saying that Clive Sinclair invested on it, but Timex and Fred Olsen invested on it. So I think independently of what happened to the Amstrad deal and all of that, I think there were indeed some interesting. I look at it from the outside and I think, okay, Clive Sinclair had ideas, came up with the prototypes and the vision and the products, and Timex would be investing on it like a venture capital or something like that. I think this has some background to support it. But
Joel, two things. Timex was used their manufacturing facilities to make things for other folks, right? They made the Polaroid. They manufactured the Polaroid camera for Polaroid, that instant camera, right? They also manufactured this crazy thing from the early 80s called the Nimslo, which was a 3D camera, little 4 lenses in the front, right?
But
what was that? Was it a camera?
Yeah, it's a camera that shots twice.
3D.
It shots
Lenticular.
with 4 sensors. Yeah. But David, I don't think the investment. So they manufactured it. Mm-hmm. But there was investment on that camera, but from what I read, not from Timex, but from Fred Olsen.
Yeah, makes sense.
I read about that. Yeah, I have the camera because someone mentioned it to me, and I bought it to the museum.
And Gustavo has a question for you, Joao. We have to ask him to unmute again because of the way this.
Hi. Hello, Joao. Thank you for participating with this meeting.
Hi, Gustavo.
And also, hi, hello. And also, I keep contact with Hugo Pinto in the museum.
My colleague. Yes.
Yes, correct. Yes. And also say to you my greetings, because your help to keep in contact with the museum. Okay, I like the web site and also the presentation that you made in 3 different languages. English, Portuguese, and Spanish. That will be great. And also, I don't know, I have a question for you, because we are very close with the Brazil. Brazil is the next country in the north of Argentina. And there, some clones machine were made.
Microdigital, yes.
Microdigital, correct. And also 2 of those machines were imported in Argentina, especially the TK90 and 95. Those machines was made with some help from Portugal or not?
No. So guys, I think it's very interesting this question. But let me just say one thing, Gustavo. I think we are all, because of the language, we are all living in different worlds. And I think my job is to try to bridge everyone together. So 2 weeks ago, I was in a session with Mr. Hugo Maser, who was the founder of Cerveni in Argentina, in Paraná. And he told the story. So it was a friend of mine from Uruguay that organized this. And a little bit like today, he invited me to be there. And I was very interested because Timex, Portugal, worked with these guys in Argentina, Cerveni, but to create the CZ1000, CZ1500, and CZ2000, which is the Spectrum, basically. But then the guys in Argentina kept developing locally those computers. Now, there was no connection. There were contacts, but there was no role of Timex in what happened in Microdigital in Brazil. So no, it didn't exist. Even the connection between Timex Portugal and Argentina, I have to say that is not as strong as I would like it to be. The fact is that the deal was made between Cerveni, this Mr. Maser, and his associate Oscar Kripa, which already passed away. But so they did the deal, let's say, directly with Sinclair. But because of the war between the UK and Argentina, they could not have a commercial relationship. So they did it through Portugal. But it was more or less like this. So no connection in terms of manufacturing with Brazil. I do know that everyone fighted to get ULAs from Ferranti because they are used in some of the machines. even the guys in Portugal, the commercial director, told me that he went to Brazil to check if they could get ULAs, because the problem was, for example, for you to have an idea, in Portugal, the ULAs would come from Ferranti or Sinclair, I don't know, but they were counted, and you needed to deliver this number of machines back. So, and they needed machines to sell elsewhere. So they needed to find a way to get ULAs and somehow, let's say, smuggle them. I'm joking, but you get the idea. And that's why developing the local computers, the Timex computer 2048 and 2068, which use an SCLD developed in Portugal, made it easier for them to keep selling computers, even when Amstrad bought Sinclair.
Cool.
Well,
And hey, that kind of brings up a thing. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So speaking of the ULA, that was brought up in that Boston computer meeting as being the specific part that would not pass the FCC. Did you? I don't know if anyone else caught on to that, but I didn't realize that. I've always read that it's like the board and stuff like that, but it was that very specific part.
I think there was issues with the ULA from Ferranti for the FCC certification, but I don't know details. I haven't gone through all the paperwork we have to see if we have something explaining that better. To be very honest, I don't know more for now, at least.
Well, by the next meeting, you'll have read all that. So.
Sorry, I was in mute. Okay, thank you very much for your explanation. It's very clear, and also my question was focused on the ULA. Exactly, that's why I asked you, because I don't know how Sarveni made the computers, is to buy the ULA, yes, directly from UK.
Yes,
or
so Gustavo, no, let me think. The Ferranti one, the Micro Digital from Brazil one was recreated, was reverse engineered by a guy called Claudio Cassens, who was part of the session I was in Uruguay. So it's very easy to have access to that explanation, but that's for the Brazilian one. Now, regarding what they did in Argentina with their own ULA after, so the first ones were coming from Portugal. They had Ferranti ULAs, that was normal. Afterwards, they started developing. They never developed, as far as I remember, they never developed the ULA in Argentina. So what happened was that, I remember Mr. Hugo Masser saying this. He said that in the beginning, they would buy the computer complete. Afterwards, they would just buy the ROM and the ULA, or they also bought keyboards, rubber keyboards from Brazil. So they used some rubber keyboards from Brazil in the Argentina machines. Then eventually, they launched the final version in Argentina with ULAs from Spain, from Investronica, from a machine called the Invest 64, which is a clone that Investronica had developed after Amstrad took over. So bottom line, no ULA developed in Argentina as far as I remember. I don't think I'm mistaken, but it's easy to confirm in the video.
Okay, perfect. The next question is, when Timex closed the computer division in US, after that, all the material or the, I don't know, the circuits or the project was moved to Portugal or not, or was discarded?
So, David, feel free to interrupt me. I don't want this. I'm not the one being interviewed, but I'll give my feedback on that. I think, Gustavo, I think we are looking at the problem on the wrong way, because remember that the computers were not being assembled in US. So the 2068 Timex Sinclair was assembled in South Korea, and all the others were assembled more or less they were assembled in Portugal. So the parts, most of them would be already in Portugal. Now, regarding what happened to any 2068 machines made in South Korea, where did they end up? I don't know. And it was not in Portugal because we did not sold them over here, the 2068 American one. So I think this is the answer.
Stuart, what do you think? Where do you think those things, the 2068s, ended up?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay.
Sorry.
Not at
Well,
Brooklyn.
some of them went to South America for sure, because they end up in South America, but I don't know how many.
Yeah.
But
So
what
the other
John
thing-
said is the way it was. There was no manufacturing in Connecticut to shut down or in the United States. They
Yep.
were always made in Scotland or in Portugal or South Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems to me that once Timex America, pulled out, obviously Timex Portugal kept going, right?
Yeah.
So there must have been some technical, I'm a technical guy, so there must have been some technical development people that were at Timex Portugal to technically develop the machines, right?
Carl, you probably weren't on the first session that I participated. I think we covered it a little bit, but I have no doubt about that. I think the main difference we had between the Timex Scotland and the Timex Portugal was that they set up an R&D facility over here. And so, for example, for example, I don't know if you guys know this, but we spoke about this before. Talking about the 1500 that you guys, I think, like a lot. And there were several versions of the 1500. There's a project called Cost Reduction TS 1500 at Timex that I have many documentation for it. And if we start seeing, we have at least 3 or 4 different versions of the 1500. You have a bigger main board, you have a smaller one, you have one with Ferrante ULA, you have one with NCR. So all of that had many iterations. I have no doubt, because I know the guys, I have no doubt that we had an R&D facility here. And for example, one of the most important research institutes in this country is called INESC, started 40 years ago. One of the first things they did were SCLDs for the TS 2068, TS 2048, Timex Terminal 3000, and many other things they were planning. So yes, there was that capability over here. And also remember that even though the computers were being thought in the beginning, designed in US, the 1500 is initially developed in the Cupertino, I think, the concept and all that, but it's assembled in Portugal. Right. But so remember that guys from Portugal would go very often to the US and collaborate. So I have thousands of documents with the name of Lou Gailey, Vitor Schiff, some of the names we mentioned today. I showed a few to David yesterday. So yeah, so that's a story that we are all trying to bring back.
Right. So that begs a question, as far as I'm concerned, as to the development of the SCLD. Is there any, like I said, are there blueprints of the SCLDs from Timex Portugal? Right, because I know we had one. Like I said, I had physical ones for the US when I developed my cartridge, but I'm sure there's something similar, or maybe it's easier to get to in Portugal.
Look, no, your question is very, very relevant, and I'm laughing just because I knew that question had to come up. So I won't give you a direct answer because I don't have it, and I'm not skilled enough, technically speaking, to tell you. What I do know is this. I got from a couple of Timex engineers over here files with lots and lots of paper, and they said, these are the timings for the SCLD, blah, blah, blah. And when you start reading it, I thought they were for the Portuguese version, that in the meantime, we reverse engineering in the museum, not me, some friends of mine that know how to do it. But so in the end, I think even though there are thousands of papers, I never saw something that someone tells me, these are the blueprints of the SCLD. You have it here. So every time I find something, it ends up being like that document that exists in US about the SCLD. There's a huge file about it. I remember seeing it was printed. It says something like printed by, it's some time. It's not Time magazine, but it's something like that. So there.
Time Designs.
So Time Design, yeah, that's it.
Time
precisely.
Designs,
yeah. So eventually, I end up all the time with that, because what you need to understand is this. So for these guys that were doing it back in the days, sometimes they refer to the ZX81 schematic as being the beginning of the spectrum. So it's obviously incorrect. But what they meant is the concepts are similar. So in the end, for their work, all of that is the basis of what they had to do. So now let me just add this detail. More than looking for the blueprints of the SCLD, we've been looking for technical documentation of other things from Portugal, specifically the TENET, which is the Timex Educational Network System, which we are working at. So there will be news, I hope, this year about that. And the 3256, which in the beginning was called 2256, just like what happened with the TS 2068. So I have some paperwork about the computer. This computer was never launched, was with 256Ks of memory. But so it also had another name. We have paperwork showing it. And so we've been also looking for that, and they gave us some documentation that it's not with me now. It's one of my more technical colleagues. So there are some details. I don't know if the full blueprints exist. I don't know.
Real quick, Stuart, you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to add to, well, Carl's questioning about what technical skills were there in Portugal. They were running a manufacturing plant, and often a significant amount of work goes into test equipment for a product, not the product that leaves the door, but how to test it so that every little thing that's wrong with one on a production line doesn't go into the scrap heap. You know, if you have a burn-in room, which I saw for disk drives, it's because you have a failure rate. You don't need a burn-in room if there's a zero failure rate, but you have one. So when they do fail, based upon their history of watching them, they would have test jigs, and they would know a lot of these products quite intimately in order to do the quality control and make test jigs and you know, and run a production line. It's
Stuart, one thing that exists over here is there's a peripheral internal from Timex Portugal. It's referred on the TC 2048 technical document, which is kind of a tester of the computer for quality control. That exists, and we have it working. So it was coded, there's the name of the programmer, it's someone from Portugal. It tests joystick ports, ULA or SCLD, all the kind of things, the keyboard, all that. So they had that, and we have some of the working devices in the museum. The ROMs were preserved. I promised already we were going to make them available. The only problem we've been fighting internally is a matter of effort and capacity to deal with all of this, but we want to do it. I have no interest on keeping them to myself. It makes no sense. So we want to do it, but those ROMs exist and we will share it. But just a part of the project.
And that just goes to show that, you know, like I said, there were technical people in Portugal, because they obviously made their own SCLD, right? The 2048 and the 2068 have a PAL version SCLD, which has nothing, is totally different than, well, I mean, functionally it's pretty much the same, but you know, it's a different design.
Not PAL. It's just with
right. It can go back, back
from
and
PAL
forth
to NTSC. Yeah.
But it just allowed them to go into more markets, right, with PAL and NTSC as opposed to the American version, which was NTSC only, right? So they had to have somebody develop that SCLD, plus all the circuit board, right? The circuit board's different.
The PSU is 9 volt, like the Spectrum. It's not 15 volts, like the US version.
Yeah. The printed circuit board's totally different. Well, not totally different, but you know, the only thing that's the same is the casing, right? The case is pretty much the same.
And not one. It's pretty much the same, but the cartridge
is fatter,
right? It's better,
right.
And one thing they did in the 2048, which I find very interesting, is that they switched back to a Kempston joystick, which was, at least in Portugal, was the standard kind of thing. So in the 2048 they did that, and they put the ROM from Sinclair, which made it 99% compatible. Yeah.
Hey, so we have a little over 5 minutes left. I want to thank everybody for showing up, and especially Joao. You know, you've been incredibly helpful and informative. And I just want to tell everybody that Joao and our talking about trying to do a lot more coordinating and cross-pollinating so that we can learn more about what happened in Portugal, so we can learn more about the folks who made our computers, and the what happened, and the where did this this craziness. He's showed me a few documents which I'm just going to say that they're mind-blowing. They really are. It's astounding. And so we're gonna work together to get some of that stuff out, so you guys can get your minds blown as well.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to mention is George Grimm, who we know for Grimm's Fairy Trails, will be joining us. I think it's the March 6th meeting. George was actually more than just Grimm's Fairy Trails at Timex. When he started there, he was one of their mainframe programmer guys. He wrote, business apps and stuff like that for Timex, the parent corporation. And then when, Timex Computer Corporation started, he was one of the folks that got pulled into that. And that document that was shared with us a few months back, the third-party, software developers guide for the 2068. If you go to the last page on that document, you'll see it's there's a form in there as a person who's writing a program, and you're supposed to send your thing to Timex, and George is the name on that form. So he's going to join us, and he has a lot of funny stories. He has a lot of funny, kind of cynical stories. And his last time I talked to him, his take was, "You guys are still interested in this stuff?"
You hear that a lot from people from back in that time period. They just don't understand it.
And hope they don't make that question in 30 years.
Right, exactly. And then the other thing that we've got a couple of other guests, between now and up to about mid-April. But the other person that I talked to just yesterday was Chuck Durang. And if you pull out your 1000 manual or your 2068 manual, he's the guy.
Yeah.
He's the author.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a lot of interesting stories to tell as well. It was very amusing talking to him last night, because he was like, "Well, I don't think I have very much to say." And I'm like, I think you probably
David,
do.
The best interview I made on the 40th anniversary of the Spectrum was a late one. So we got it a few days before with Professor Steve Vickers. So he was one adapting the ROM for the Spectrum at the company called Nine Tiles.
Yes.
But he was also the creator of the manual. And the fact is that he's probably the person that has more responsibility on the fact many of us became programmers, because of the quality of the manual of the Spectrum. I'm talking about the ZX Spectrum. That even taught you how to put assembly and things like that, made the difference. And so perhaps the same will happen with US.
And so to your point, right? Chuck and I were talking about this, and he kind of fell into the Sinclair Timex side by accident. He was in the publishing industry, writing and organizing technical manuals for other stuff. But he bought a ZX80 because he felt like didn't know very much about computers, and he's like, this thing came out, it was $200. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna get one of these, I'm gonna learn some stuff. And he ended up meeting up with Nigel Searle because he was in Boston and they were in Boston, and Nigel said, would you be willing to help us with this manual for the American manual for the ZX81? And I'm not going to give too much away here, except that he made a very interesting observation about the difference between computer folks in the UK and in America. The folks in the UK are very much tinkerers, right? Whereas the general American computer audience was not, right? And so there had to be this kind of translation that had to happen, and that's what he did. And then he shared with me a very good point, which is, and we probably don't remember this, is at the time when computers were reviewed, one of the things that a lot of reviews said was the manual sucks. And a lot of the reviews of the 1000 and the 2068 said the manual's great. This is what manuals should look like. So he's very interesting. He'll be on us with us on April 16th.
Okay. I have a theory about the manuals, because I find it amazing that when you start reading a manual from a computer from this period, you realize that they have to teach you what you can do with a computer. And I find that fascinating, because nowadays you buy a tablet and you know what you can do with it, so you don't read the manual anymore. But back then they had to teach you what you could do.
There's no manual nowadays. To the TV.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say,
give it to your grandson and you'll find out.
I love your shirt, Charles.
This is one of the four. Yeah, one of the 4 shirts. I missed last meeting because my mother-in-law went into the hospital, but this is one of the 4. So I wanted to show that off. And the other thing is, I was showing this earlier. This is the brother. This is the EP20. 20. Right, and it smells great. I don't know why. But anyway. This is the one that has the, it's pretty similar, if I do say so myself, to the keyboard that's on the Timex, right? This is probably where they got it from, right? This is the actual brother unit here.
That's awesome.
If you confirm that, I'll have to buy one for the museum.
Yeah, it really looks like it. I mean, there's obviously the up-down enter key, but it's just turn 90 degrees, right? But yeah, it really looks like, it's got the outlines around the keys. So they probably, might have lifted it from this particular.
One thing I found amazing from Dan presentation was his take on the micro drives, because I was seeing the Boston presentation this afternoon. And they were saying, it looked like Clive Sinclair talking about micro drives. It's going to be the best thing in the world. And now, oops, we made a mistake with it.
It would have been nice to go further into that, because I think those things were just props, more or less. I mean, they were probably real, but obviously they were silver colored to match the 2068 design. And that's kind of where I'm going with. I had to sand down the Sinclair because it's raised, right? And the mic, so you have to take that off and make it flat. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But,
I have to be careful Carl doesn't come over to my house and start sanding down my stuff. I'll be like, get away from my hardware. What are you doing?
And because I saw that silver TS1000 you guys have over in the your museum, and I was like, I might have to get the paint cans.
No, but those
out
those are let's say props, like you said,
right,
from what they call the tool room, where the guy from the designing over here, Enrique Suzano, made a lot of experience. The same happened with I showed in the session about Argentina some props we have here with different colors and things that never went to the market. So those were experiments. Same way, I have some rubber keyboards from the Far East, from other companies that never went into the product. So when they were choosing some samples, they gave me a couple of those things.
Well, it's been another it's been an amazing meeting.
Stuart's on mute. He's trying to say something.
Let me hit the all unmute. Go ahead, Stuart.
I just wanted to chime in for those who may not know, relevant to the basic manual being very good and people learning how to program with that computer. When the Raspberry Pi came out, the inspiration for that was supposedly the university professor seeing that there had been an arc in incoming students for like computer topics at the university level. They saw this huge drop off in the preparedness of students when the computers changed from being open with like basic interpreters and different things you could program the computer, when they all switched into games where you couldn't really program the games. You needed a development kit that cost $10,000 or something, or getting too complicated. The geeky kids who were 15-year-olds were playing games, but they were not programming. And the Raspberry Pi was partly introduced in response to that to come out with something that cost about as much as a textbook would, but was open and would get youngsters back into actually coding rather than just playing games.
Playing games, yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Even the new version, the 400, the Raspberry Pi 400, there was a lot of articles in UK saying that it's a renewed ZX Spectrum in the concept.
Mm-hmm. Well, it literally is
with keyboard. Yeah.
Ryan, that's all he uses. He's over here yesterday with his 400, and he's like, for like 6 hours, we were just messing around, and like half that time was on that 400, and he's just showing me everything he's been doing related to the 2068 and his programming on there. So
yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's also got this one for Joel.
Viarco, yeah, that's Portuguese. It's a Portuguese company from the 80s. I don't know. I don't think they exist anymore. Viarco.
Nice. They do.
Okay. Well, we'll see you March 6th. Is that right? I think that's right. Adam?
Yeah. Hey, I don't know. You're in charge.
I'm looking. Okay, March 6th. Yes. Today's the 19th, March 6th. And actually, I want to say, Adam, you mentioned that someone had difficulty getting in, and I saw that Alan
Brian did. Yeah.
And Alan was in, but somehow got bounced.
He's been chatting on the YouTube chat. He's been putting messages.
Reach out to me so we can sort this out, and I can figure out how to make it.
On a personal level?
No, anybody who has a hard time getting in, reach out to me. Either through the groups.io or directly through the website.
Okay.
And we'll figure out why people can't get in and make it so that anybody who wants to get in can get in.
Great.
Yeah. And then,
thank you for arranging this.
Oh, I love this. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, especially to get Dan, because that was really impressive. Like I said,
that was a big one. That's the big kahuna.
Because he's got so much information in there, that it, like I said, just 2 hours or even an hour and a half that he was with us.
Not enough.
Not going to cover it.
I'm hoping we can get him back.
Yeah,
we'll bribe him with something. Maybe